Hey guys, this is your girl Lira, and you're listening to Self-Reflection Podcast. Thank you guys for joining me on another episode of Self-Reflection Podcast. I pray and I hope that this podcast episode finds you guys in the best possible state that you could be in for yourself in today. And if you're not doing your best, I want to encourage you in this moment, like always, to create a moment for self-reflection, because self-reflection is one of those things that I have found that it has allowed me to love myself a little bit more. It has allowed me to take care of my mental health. It has allowed me to find inner peace for myself. And also the way I got on my healing journey was through self-reflection. So if you are not feeling your best in this moment, I want to encourage you to go ahead and create some time for self-reflection. And if you cannot handle the emotions that you are feeling in this moment by yourself, please go out and get some support. Reach out to a friend, a family member, a therapist, a life coach, a pastor, right? There are people out there that are willing to support you on your journey. You don't have to do this thing by yourself and alone. And life is challenging, so we need people. And I will remind you again, we're social beings. We need one another. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me on this conversation today. I am super excited to have this conversation because this is someone that I have tried to actually get on this podcast about a year ago. It never just happened. I was just telling him off camera about the story, and I'm super stoked to have him on this podcast. Forgive me if I say your name wrong, but today we are going to be talking to Amorit.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. But before we get into our conversation, please introduce or formally tell us a little bit about who you are and, where type of work you do.
Yeah, I mean, the title of work, I go by the inner engineer now because, in my past, I was a civil structural engineer here building high-rise towers in Australia. And then recently, having shifted and moved on from all of that, the work that I do is basically coach, guide, mentor. Mentoring is pretty much the core of what I do. And now having grown, a podcast and a community around all of that, there's a lot of masterminding, so mentoring and masterminding. Ultimately, living a spiritually aligned life is really at the heart of what drives me. I think there's a lot of people. Generally, when you step into my ecosystem, the key thing that we're doing is we're helping you align, build out a vision that's really aligned to who you truly authentically are. We can talk a lot more about that. Then we do a lot of shadow work, your inner healing, what's holding you back. But then also we go ahead and, whether it's career, whether it's leadership, whether it's in business, help you actually create the life, of your dreams in many ways, but making sure that it's built upon your authentic self-reflection, right? Reflect upon your true self and build out your true desires, not based on what the society wanted for you or your parents wanted for you, etc., and so forth, because that just leads to lesser levels of fulfillment. So ultimately, it's about purpose, it's about fulfillment, but it's about guiding you through the entire journey from getting clear all the way through to actually building it out.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Did anyone ever tell you have a really soothing voice?
Touch wood. I do get that compliment every now and then on the podcast. It's like, you've got a great voice for podcasting. At least they don't say I've got a great face for radio, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So you definitely do have a soothing voice. Do you do meditations as well?
Yeah, there's meditations on the Inspired Evolution channel. On YouTube. Yeah, so my journey, I guess initially I came into like teaching, coaching and stuff like that as a meditation teacher. So I was a meditation teacher for a while. And then, from there I evolved into more purpose coaching. And then from purpose coaching now it's become like, what it is today with the spiritual mentoring and spiritual and entrepreneurship coaching. Basically, spiritual entrepreneurship is really what drives me.
I love that. How did you make the switch from, engineering into more of the spiritual journey that you're on right now?
Yeah, so that was actually the birthplace of the Inspired Evolution podcast. So, I mean, I can look back now and it's very easy to sort of articulate as to why I made the switch. But at the time, it was just I was having a massive existential crisis. Like, yeah, my job was not aligned. I can look back and now easily say to you, I was out of alignment to my values. Yeah,
Mm,
my core values are connection, contribution, celebration. These are three core values that really drive me. And for anybody that's tuning in that wants to get clear on their core values, amoritsandu.com/values, yeah, or inspiredevolution, one long word.com/values. You'll be as clear on your values as I am on mine 20 minutes from now, right? But for me, I was connection, contribution, celebration, still am. But in my engineering work, like there was no connection. I mean, some contribution, but there was no celebration.
mm,
And so I say this to people, was like, yeah, that job was great for the right person. Yeah, but I wasn't the right person for that job.
mm,
Yeah. And that's again, self-reflection is the name of your podcast, right? Like I don't think we take the time to slow down and sort of see what is actually aligned for me. Like for me, understanding my values was cool. Because from there, I didn't like at the time I didn't realize it was about values, but going through, I saw we called this the inspired mindset in my mentoring. But I saw individuals that were living life on their own terms, right? They were authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs, teachers, and they were having an impact in alignment to what they most believed in.
mhm,
Yeah. They were in service. Yeah. And so for me, that really spoke to me. I could see my corporate ladder and where it was taking me. And I was like, not, there's very few people that really inspire me on this path. Yeah. And so I wasn't that inspired to evolve, but had inspirations
yeah,
outside of, yeah. And I was like, I want to evolve into this space. I wonder, what that would look like. So that was the birthplace of the Inspired Evolution podcast. I was inspired by people and I was ready to evolve. And so every week I would interview people
mm,
once a week, sort of see how they got to where they got to and what they were offering. And it was always, there was always something remarkable that they were teaching. They always had a message in their heart that they were like championing that was bigger than them, right? So it was easy to sort of get out of their own way and do the unorthodox, uncomfortable thing
mm.
because the message and the mission mattered so much, right? So yeah, I started interviewing people, and that was, I mean, we've been doing an interview a week every week for the last 8 years, and for the last 2 years we've been doing two a week. Touch wood. And yeah, that's been the Inspired Evolution podcast, and that was the vehicle that eventually sort of helped me sort of break away from my corporate work.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the three core values you just mentioned right now?
Yeah, connection,
Mhm.
contribution, and celebration. What would you like to know about it?
And how does that like connect to our own personal life, and how can we use that to find our greater self?
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, your core values. So, every spiritual teacher that you will speak to generally will have a lower self and a higher self. There will be some people call it ego and spirit.
Mhm.
I really like Gary Zukav. Him and I have a kinship. He calls it personality and soul. Yeah, and I like that languaging the best because I feel like it has the least sort of context packed into it already. So it feels like it's a bit of an open slate. Whereas when I say ego, people go, "Oh yeah, there's everybody has a different idea of what their ego is, right?" And spirit means different things to different people. But personality and soul is pretty clean as a context. Touch wood. So you've got your personality and you've got your soul, right? And when you tune into like, all these spiritual teachers, they all say also that, your soul came in wanting to learn a certain pedigree of lessons, let's call it that, right? So like it knew that it was going to come in and, there was going to be like 6 or 7 lessons in this lifetime that it knew it wanted to learn. How it went about learning them was, up to you, free will, choice, and, that sort of stuff. But
Mhm.
ultimately it wanted to pick up some of these key lessons. And so in there, that's your soul. But then your personality, which is what we occupy day to day, it's the character that we assume in the story of our life,
Mhm.
right? Is built upon like our values. So how do you define like what's my personality really like? What's its true authentic self? Yeah. Beyond what other people have coached it into being. Right. So when we help people discover their purpose, the key thing that we're helping them do is everything starts with recognizing that the universe is having this really trippy thing going on, which is we are the universe looking in on itself.
Mm.
Yeah, like I know that's a bit mind bendy the first time you hear it, but then like it's a very easy truth to step into. Really, it's like I'm all like the universe is the tree over there, the universe is Amorit over here, but it's all the universe. But it's also simultaneously having this experience of like, oh, Amorit exhales what that tree inhales, and the tree exhales what Amorit inhales. Like we're having this complete dance
Yeah.
between the two. Right. So the universe is folded in on itself. And it's like, why is it doing that? You can't deduce much. Like people have always asked, what is the purpose of life? We don't know. Yeah. But one of the things you can deduce is like, curiosity must be like interwoven into the fabric of the whole thing because it is looking in on itself. Right. So curiosity becomes pretty divine, pretty sacred, however you want to label it. Right. Touchwood, we call it sacred curiosities. So the universe is sacredly curious about itself. Yeah. And so in that space, you can start to see that there are certain things like you're not superfluous to the grand design of it all, right? You were put here for a reason. And so if you're here and there's sacred curiosity and the universe is looking through itself through you, yeah, it's incumbent upon us to sort of honor that. And for a variety of reasons, and we can talk more about that, but it's incumbent upon us to honor, what it wants to see itself as through us. And how do you line that back up? Right, is the question. And that's where your values come in. You line up to your person. Like I'm Indian, so I make this joke and it's not that funny, but you know how they say my body is a temple. It's like, the value, your values are the pillars of the temple that is your personality, right? That is your sacred, authentic personality. Yeah. Now, generally what will happen is you'll notice mine's a connection, contribution, celebration. And for those that are tuning in, some of you will resonate with what I'm saying because you're tuning into this podcast. It's likely you have a similar value set as well, because otherwise we wouldn't value the same things and we wouldn't be having the conversation that we're having, right? So in there's it's important to recognize that everyone's going to have their own unique values. And again, you can discover them amoritsandu.com/values. And once you've got them, the key thing in there is now it becomes really easy to, you can audit your life in so many different ways. Like you look at the previous career, right? It was like, was there connection? Was it aligned to my core value? No. Was there contribution? A little bit, yeah. Celebration, no. So I was only meeting half out of my top 3 values. But you take a look at podcasting, you take a look at coaching, you take a look at public speaking, you take a look at masterminding, mentoring. Do I get to connect? Yes. Yeah, I'm connecting people, connecting with ideas, connecting people to people, people to ideas, ideas to ideas. It's a lot of connection. Yeah. Is there a contribution? I hope so, touch wood. And it's much more aligned to the kind of contribution I want to have. Yeah. Celebration. Hopefully everybody leaves life celebrating a little bit fuller, richer. Me too, having lived into my alignment. So, I mean, you can already see that there's just so much flow, right? And that's the name of the book that I wrote called Metaflow. And that's that flow that you experience when you're in alignment on a mega scale in your life, right? Like everybody feels these little resistances, just trying to hack and optimize little morning routines, evening routines. I totally get it. And there's value in that, right? But really, you can hack your entire life. I don't want to use the word hack, but align your entire life so you actually experience that kind of flow in your life. And what are you aligning to? It's living in alignment to your values, right? Because once you get honor your values, from there, you can sort of see whether the curiosities you're living into through your work, through your career, through your relationships even, are they built upon your values? Because if they're not, then they're somebody else's curiosities. And that's what we call hijacked curiosities, right? It's like your mum's curiosities, your dad's curiosities, your cousin's curiosities, your siblings' curiosities, society's curiosities, your teacher's curiosities. That's what they were curious about. Like everybody around me thought I was good at numbers, right? And I should become an engineer. And they weren't wrong. Like I became quite a good engineer, but now I look at my propensity for numbers and I'm studying astrology and it's coming in even more useful there. Right? Because it's all about numbers. And I'm just like, I just listened to what everybody said around numbers and sort of meant, the careers that require numbers are engineering or accounting. I really like physics as well, but I'm just going to go into engineering because that's what I could see stepped in next. And everybody was grooming me into that. So I got hijacked a little bit. right? Now, everybody's journey is perfect, so don't demonize that. But there's that difference, right? I spent 15 years doing something that wasn't my core, true, authentic self. Yeah. Now, once again, I don't demonize that process because for me, it was important to go through that process so that I can come back, learn from it, and share with others. Hey, save yourself the 15 years, get aligned to your values in 20 minutes. So then
Yeah.
that way you make informed decisions. But that was my journey and my responsibility, right? So once you're living into your sacred curiosities, then it becomes really easy to come into your purpose, right? Because what, like, if you have an intersection between 3 or 5 or more curiosity points, so for me, it was like spiritual evolution, personal development, living a better life, abundance, freedom, conscious media, good news media. You can draw a circle around 4 or 5 things. And if you can do that and you're genuinely like your genuine curiosity points, all you have to do is take the time to cultivate some of that. And if you cultivate your curiosities, your genuine curiosity, your sacred curiosities, that's actually what your passion is.
Mm.
You're innately curious about this from a soul deep level. Yeah. That's your passion. People, I don't know what I'm passionate about anymore. So, well, spend some time. What are you authentically curious about? What's your sacred curiosity? And if you start to cultivate that, you fill up what I call the cup of passion. This is what I think when I say fill up your cup. I think this is the cup that they're referring to, right? Or it is, at least in my mind, right? This is filling up your cup. It's your passions. And it takes cultivating your curiosities. Take some time for yourself. I'm curious about, healing. Maybe I should go away on a retreat, or maybe I should invest in a training, or I'm curious about, my mind. Maybe you should spend some time meditating. Yeah, but you passionately, you fill up your cup of passion by each time you spend some time with your curiosities. Yeah, and it can't just be a single curiosity point. It's got to be 2 to 3 to 5. Ideally, a minimum 3. It's good when you've got 5 curiosity points gelling together because there's a certain electricity that's generated around them, right? When you've got a lot of them bouncing off each other, yeah, like it zings better. And then they come together and you cultivate your passions. And the more and more you do that, and this is where people try to go, oh, I'm curious about coffee, and they'll build an entire business around it. And they're like, oh, that's my purpose. And it's like, whoa. And then eventually they end up with just another job, right? They didn't really love coffee that much.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, I'm, curious about comedy. I'm curious about coffee. I'm curious about cars. Now they've got potentially something that's like comedian, coffee, cars. I've been watching Jerry Seinfeld, comedians and cars getting coffee recently. So that was an example that's in my mind. But you know what I mean? Like that's now something he's passionate about. Yeah. And so that fills up the cup because it's got 3 curiosity points in it together. As you fill up your cup of passions for yourself by cultivating your curiosities, there will come a time, yeah, when you're just so over dripping, touch wood, in your passion that someone will come up to you and be like, what are you doing? It's like this. And I'm like, I need some help with that. Yeah. And it takes some trust in the process to sort of go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
But what your passions are for you, if you just learn to serve that to the world, that's what your purpose is. And that's all the difference between passion and purpose. That's it. Those are the only 2 key differences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got your passion for you and your purpose for the world. And so that's the journey from values to sacred curiosity to passion to purpose. Yeah. And you don't want to rush into finding your purpose just because you're curious about something or these are your values. You want to take the time to cultivate them into your passions. Because if they don't stand the test of you spending the time with them to cultivate them into passion, you were never that passionate about them in the first place. Yeah. And that opportunity gives you to refine it into something that's actually really meaningful for you. And then it'll naturally, it'll have its own zing, right? As you step into sharing that as your purpose.
Wow, that was such a depth explanation. And it brought me to this idea of how much of one has to become aware, right? To be able to get to that place.
It sounds quite like it's a whole body of work. And I know I keep hopping on about this, but for me, it's always pretty remarkable. People tune into a 60-minute podcast to listen to the thoughts and the concepts and the theories that are shared, which I think is really powerful. But then also, like I said, 20-minute masterclass, and it's literally practical. You pull out, I send you a work doc and you work through it in 20 minutes, step by step. Some people do it faster than that. And you literally have your values. So, you're already self-aware enough to do that exercise, which is the other thing. You quickly go through the exercise and it doesn't require you to be Yoda to do the exercise, right? Like I run it through corporate settings. People are, generally haven't really peered under the self-development hood at all. And for those that really have, it's also been game changing for them in my mentoring because they're like, oh, finally. I've always been like, doing all this stuff around self-development. Now I really understand who I am, at the core of it all. And from there, I can start to, this makes sense for me, this doesn't, or this, so on and so forth.
Thank you so much for that. I know that like you talk about spirituality a good handful, right? And when it comes down to living our true authentic self, I think one has to like align themselves spiritually as well. So for someone that is still looking to get on this journey for themselves, what are some practical steps they can start to take to align themselves spiritually so that they can align themselves with what they want to do?
First of all, I believe, and this is just my belief, it doesn't have to be anybody's, but I believe if there's 8 billion of us here, there's 8 different versions of spirituality, right?
Mhm.
I think it's unique to the individual. Does that mean that religions and all the paths that have come before us, don't matter? Absolutely not. Like, absolutely they matter. They are like, sometimes I look at, the time that we're living in, it's very interesting. Like we've got the ability to tune into Chinese medicine, we've got yogic science, we've got Ayurveda, we've got Christian beliefs and like the relationship people have with angels. There's sort of like we're living in this really abundant, interconnected time where people can really forge, right, their own spirituality. Now, there's a lot to be said in terms of following a particular path all the way down to its roots and what that does for you. But also, we're in a very dynamic time where more and more people are starting to identify as spiritual, but not
Mhm.
necessarily religious. Yeah. And we go through waves. Right now, there's a bit of a renaissance in religion as well. People are starting to find that spirituality isn't like, it's not as, so for some people, spirituality without religion doesn't seem to be as deeply rooted. And so they're finding like when life gets challenging and their spirituality is put to the test, then
Mhm.
they're kind of like, oh, it's not standing up to the test, right? Which is totally fine, right? That can happen. And so they're retreating back into religion, which is fine. And I shouldn't use the word back. But ultimately, the key point there is there's spirituality, there's religion. However you come to your spirituality, even if you don't come to your spirituality, again, this is pretty trippy, right? But there's no denying, and I mean, I know I have a certain worldview based on this, but you are a spiritual being having a human experience,
I agree.
right? And so even if you are not spiritual in your mind, yeah, that's totally fine because once again, the universe is looking in on itself, trying to pretend that it's not spiritual through this particular avatar.
Mhm.
Right? And that's just what it wants to see itself as this Wednesday. Right? It's like, hey, like, I'm going to pretend that I'm not infinite, and I'm not spiritual. And it really is just all about matter and none of it is energy. Cool. Okay. And that's this person's. So I think, Touchwood, there's the spiritual community in its early stages, like spiritual ego is the first trap, right? That I see, and one of the teachers, Dr. Robert J. Gilbert, rest in peace, he would talk a lot about this on the path. He was a Rosicrucian. Yeah, he would just say like it's the first trap on the journey. It's like, hey, like check it out. Like I figured this out, you haven't yet, and it's like, oh, you're just like you end up stuck, not them. Just honor their journey, let them go on their path. So, I mean, but that doesn't really answer your question in terms of how to come into it. For me, my truth is inspired evolution, right? There are people around you that inspire you. Yeah. So you'll see here, this is Nat. She was my first yoga teacher. And, she's like an auntie to my kids. She's like like an older sister figure to me in my life. And yeah, we've known each other for the better part of a decade now. Yeah. And, she was someone that inspired me. And it was like cultivating the values, like the person that she was. She used to be ex-corporate in IT. She made a shift, and so all of a sudden it was like, hey, what's, there for you? And so you start to, I wouldn't say you start to build your spirituality based on what other people believe in, but there's a certain frequency that the people that really like light you up carry in there. It's like, like that really inspires me and that really inspires me, and that with a little bit of self-reflection can reflect back to you who you really are, right? And it's like, like I really value earthen-based spirituality. Like these elements just make sense to me. Touch with earth, fire, wind, and water. It's a bit Celtic, it's a bit pagan. We've burnt people at the stake for believing in that sort of stuff, But when I think about it, like I wake up, I have good quality water, I spend some time in the sun. If I ground and spend my feet in the earth, if I do a little bit of movement throughout my day, cultivate some good breaths, like actually my life feels better. I can see why these were idolized as, something special. So, yeah, I mean, I believe in those, so it's entirely up to you to come in from where you can. It's a big question.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I'm not this person that will say, oh, everybody needs to meditate, even though I've been in that phase in my life where I'm like, oh my God, meditation. Like, you don't meditate? Like, but no, genuinely, like, everybody's on their spiritual path as it is. I think for most people, I wouldn't even say an inclination. They know their spirituality somewhere in there. And sometimes it's just a matter of, yeah, giving that permission to shine. I think that's, some people have a lot to say about the kind of culture that we're in now. That they're saying like, therapy speak is becoming a bit too um, overused in the common vernacular. Like people are using terms like healing and trauma a lot more freely, and that it shouldn't be the case because then, like, but I mean, it's also a sign, touch with that people are becoming more self-aware.
Yes.
And in your self-awareness, like I think it's also a sign that people are waking up spiritually. Like, I go into corporate environments now and I don't talk about astrology, but people like end up talking about star signs. People are talking about things that, potentially are more spiritually inclined in their nature just naturally. So I do feel like there is, a waking up that's happening all around us and people are waking up to their spirituality.
Before I dive into my next question, when you talk about a lot more people are waking up, how do you see this benefiting us the more people have this awakeness?
The question's not me looking for an answer, it's me trying to find the answer I mean, it's overwhelming in terms of how much better things potentially could be and will be. And I mean, better sounds like where we are right now is not where we're meant to be. And that's also not true, right?
Yeah.
Everything breaks down to break through. But if you look around at the world around you right now, there is a lot of breakdown happening. And this is always happening in many ways.
Yeah.
Right now, it's certainly like accentuated, and looking at kind of the astrological makeup of kind of where things are at right now, it's part of where we're meant to be. Things will start to soften at the beginning of 2026. Like, a couple months in, things start to shift a little bit collectively for a lot of people, touch wood. But, it's breakdown to breakthrough by design, right? I've asked many, teachers on my podcast, it's like, why does that have to be the formula? Why do we have to break down to break through? Like, can't we just break through, break through? And it's pretty much universal. It's a formula that is just the way that you learn your lessons in this, in this reality that we're in. You do learn from breakthrough to breakthrough at certain times, but the lessons don't come frequently enough. Yeah. And we're here to learn. They call it the Earth School. And so every time you're interfaced with a challenge, you develop the skills and then you break through. So what changes? For me, just little things, right? Like starting internally, like I'm more compassionate to myself, so I'm more compassionate to others. I'm nicer to be around. I'm more padding than I am sharp, angular energy in the world, touch wood. If I'm exhibiting more kindness, those little moments of kindness, they shift and they change people's interactions. If I'm living in alignment to my passion, my purpose, my joy, that subconsciously gives other people permission to feel like, oh, touch wood, that's possible for me as well. They live into their passion, their purpose, their joy. I mean, I'm pretty trippy. I think about, imagine if everybody loved the work that they do. They spent 8 hours of their day, not begrudgingly like putting on clothes to go do something, to interact with people that don't inspire them, but legitimately were doing like, this is what I was put here to do. Like you can already feel it, right? Like the energy of that is so different,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yeah, some people are going to be doing this, some people are going to do that, and like just how innovative, how creative, how free, how joyous, it can be. And I think there's a massive revolution that's happening right now that's moving us closer and closer. I mean, I could do this with you for like 20, 30 other things. We're going to run out of time in the podcast. But legitimately, the more you get to know yourself, the more you awaken, like touch wood, the easier your experience becomes. Yeah, in many ways. It's challenging in some because like you got to do the inner work. But when you break through on the inner work, like you've shed, it's like a snake shedding its skin, right? Like you step into this whole new space, and in there you've got more freedom internally, right? It's like, oh, like I'll just give you a very practical example. So the other day, my wife was carrying a pouch around the house that had a glass object in there that mattered to me. Yeah. And she dropped it and it smashed on the ground. Now, there was an Amorit that was like 2, 3 years ago, would have been like so attached to that object. Yeah. And I still am kind of attached to that object. I feel like it's an important object to me. And the pouch, right? And, the whole thing. And then when it happened, like my wife was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like I'm so like it was like you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
And I had my moment and I was like, all good, that sucks. And I moved on and I went back, sat down, and started having my dinner. And even she reflected back to me. She was like, "You're not pissed off or angry." And I was like, "Well, what's the point? Like I'm just gonna work myself into a state. It's already happened."
Yeah.
And I could see just what that meant to her because I could see energetically she was bracing for someone to be upset, to potentially be angry, and I didn't have that in me. I was just like, like, and it wasn't even like I was trying to be enlightened. Touch wood, I
Yeah.
couldn't even be bothered. Like I was just, at that point, it was just like I can't be asked. Like
Yeah.
it's just I'm gonna work myself into a twist and a knot and be angry and be upset. Why? Like she obviously knows I'm not thrilled about it. I'm not thrilled about it, but whatever, moving on. Like it's happened now. Like I'll go back to eat my dinner, enjoy my night, right?
Mhm.
And so that sort of gives an example, like just how we treated each other, our attachment to things. Like that's a very practical example of just how much smoother like life can be. Touch wood, when you start to do this internal work and wake up to yourself.
Yeah, my goodness. When you talk about that, when I got to that place, I guess you can say, where you are able to detach from things, I felt weird. I'm not sure if that happened to you as well. When I don't even know how to explain it, but when I got to a place where I was no longer somewhat attached to anything uh, outside of myself, right? It kind of felt weird for me, and I felt like I was doing something wrong at times. Because I'm not sure if I wasn't ready to be in that type of like energetic field yet, or I'm not. Can you shine some light for me on that spot as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a maturation that you're going through.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think like I think we got to be careful because linguistically it might sound like to others it's like, oh, we're being Buddhist and stoic and we're inviting you to just not attach to anything. I mean, ultimately there is a whole spiritual path there, yeah, because the Buddhists believe, and there's plenty to suggest that they're not wrong. You spend your whole life cultivating attachments, and that makes, sorry to get super dark for just a sec, but that makes death and dying really hard
Mhm.
because you're attached to all the things that you've built attachments to,
Yeah.
right? And the one surefire thing you've got is like, hey, I was born, and some people say taxes, but there are tax havens. So, I mean, I'm not sure taxes are that universal, but it's like, it's not death, taxes, and birth, right? But like death is touch wood, like I don't want to touch wood, may everybody be happy, healthy, well. But it's coming, it's going to come for everyone.
Hmm.
And so in that space, it's like they believe if you do the work of letting go of your attachments in this life, then actually at death, it's like death is quite smooth because it's like I've already let go of everything. I can just let go of the last little remnants of me too. And in fact, they do that because they have this belief system. And sorry, this doesn't have to be your belief system. I know I'm getting a bit deep here, but they have this belief system that the final thought that you carry and the karmic load that you carry actually dictates where you go in the afterlife.
Mm.
And then also that trajectory that you set into your afterlife also impacts where you land when you reincarnate. And they've got a whole formula for it, right? Like it's literally this many days, this happens to the outer body, the subtle body, the inner body. And then you start to recoalesce into another body, and then boom, you're born somewhere else, right?
Mm.
But and so for them, the work is here to unattach so that when you flick into your next life, you're having a much smoother next life once again, right? Now, you've got to be careful because for some people, that's not necessarily their path. Yeah, like it's a beautiful spiritual path, but I can't just tell you, oh, just unattach from things when there are things that genuinely matter to you, right? Like touch wood, like you could tell me to, Amrit, like like unattached from connection. Connection's my highest value for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like all of a sudden stop connecting. And it's like, well, maybe in the future it's like about connecting to, less and less to maybe earthly things because the unattachment thing is present, and connect deeper to yourself. But in the end, I'm going to lose that connection to self as well, right? As I know it, touch wood, in this life. And maybe that's the journey that I need to reflect upon. But that doesn't mean that I need to go rushing into that right now, right? Like honoring the journey for each step along the way for where it is. So, yeah, I mean, so I've lost track of your question now. I started really down this deep rabbit hole. Um, I lost track of your question. My apologies.
Attachment.
Attachment, yeah. So I don't think unattachment is for everybody, but I think there's a maturation that happens. Thank you. I think there's a maturation that happens when you start stepping into, I like to call it, more spaciousness inside. That's when you describe like, hey, like I'm choosing not to react to things. I
yeah.
mean, there's a whole moment in your journey when you start to realize the difference between reaction and response. That's like a whole thing. Yeah, it's like you can meditate for a while and still not understand the difference. And eventually it's like, there's certain thoughts that I react to, they trigger me, and I bite the hook without even consciously. And there's certain thoughts where I can build a bit of space
Mm.
between me and biting the hook. Now I can respond. Now I've got choice. Now I'm back to my sovereignty. I've like healed something. I've dropped the energetic charge. And so that space between thoughts, now you've got space within yourself, and you can operate from that space. And I see that as a maturation. I think that's maturity speaking in there. You have the choice to whether you want to attach or not.
I think the first time I learned about detaching was at Sonoma State when I first came across Dr. Wayne Dyer. He
Yeah.
often talked about be open to all and attach yourself to nothing. So
Yeah.
that was my first come about this terminology of detaching to, things. And ever since that process, when I went into, I guess, finding myself, right? I reminded myself, be open to or attach yourself to nothing. And when I finally got to a place where I was able to, just be, right? It felt really awkward, because I've always been so used to holding on to everything and what everyone says to me. So thank you for that.
And that's where having like a guide or a coach or a mentor is really helpful, like
Mhm.
really useful. Yeah. Because you are stepping into there's like a whole new, like, it's like I'm picturing walking up the stairs and you land on a whole new landing within yourself. And you've never really landed here before, but this is the way up. Yeah. And so you're like, I don't see handrails. I don't even know, like, are there more stairs? Is this solid? Is it crooked? And just having someone, and sometimes they don't even have to be where you've been. It's
Yeah.
just like you just normalizing it by talking to someone like, hey, like something's going on in my interior world. And it's like, yeah. I mean, I remember last time I went through a shift, it was really disconcerting. And you're like, okay, cool. This does happen when I'm going through shit. Okay, cool. You can start to land on your landing a little bit smoother, right? And this is where having community or coaching and mentoring really, 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 really helps. Yeah. Your work is your own to do. Yeah, but it can be super supportive to have these sort of support structures around you.
I agree. And what are some, I guess, I don't want to use the word, but characteristics, I guess, that you have seen, or some things that people have exhibit when they are going through that uh journey for themselves, right? What are some things that you see that might help somebody else that's listening to this podcast if they are on their own spiritual journey as well?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of hallmarks of transformation is afoot. One of my favorite ones, and this is just, again, I can be quite masculine in that way, in touch with. But one of the ones I'll share with you is just like stress.
Mm.
Yeah. So for me, stress for you, and I know there's like an unhealthy amount of stress, but that unhealthy amount of stress builds up because we don't listen to the healthy amount of stress.
Mm.
Like stress is actually a free life coach, is a free spiritual guide in some ways in your own life. Yeah. Like you're feeling stress, getting dressed, going to work. Does this work matter to you? Does it light you up? You feel stressed when you go to interact with that person. Is that person meant to be in your life?
Mm.
Yeah, you feel the stress and you go, you don't listen to it, you move through it anyway. You feel the stress and it's like, I'll just down a couple more coffees and just power my way through this. Keep doing that. Yeah, but as you keep doing that, you get more and more stressed. This is that concept of metaflow. You're getting more and more out of alignment. Yeah, there's less and less flow. So there's less and more resistance. That resistance shows up in you as stress, right? To the point then, like, I don't want to sound like this, touch wood, but at some point, like, it gets so much stress, so much inflammation. Most diseases are diseases of inflammation, right? That stress is like burning you up inside. But that's when dis-ease starts to, like, it's like, yeah, something. And so learning to listen, yeah, becomes really important. And that's that alignment piece in there. So stress, I mean, is an easy one. If you're super stressed, yeah. And I can talk a lot because I coach people on corporate burnout, leaderships, and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's different ways to manage burnout and stuff like that. And it's not just what you think in it every day, but that's a whole other topic. We can talk about it. But yeah, stress is a free life coach in and around your life. So if you're feeling super stressed again and again, and it's not shifting and it's not moving, there's an opportunity, the name of this podcast, to self-reflect and say, hey, what's going on here? Right? Like, what do I need to realign? Does something need to shift? Does something need to change? Do I need to shift and change? Sometimes it's not always about like, I need to make a grandiose change in my life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, I'm going to be doing this work for the next 3 years. Like, I know I am. Like, it's just everything around me. So why am I going to continue to begrudge this for the next 3 years? Or am I going to discover my values and look at which of my values, even if it's half a value, that it's going to line up to, and focus on that and be like, hey, at least there's this little modicum of meaning. At least it's letting me do this. Yeah. And sometimes it's just perspective. Often it's not, but sometimes it is.
You talked about burnout there, which many of us face that. Can you give us a little, like maybe 2 to 3 strategies on how to work through that burnout? Because I think
you don't need that many. So there's 2 key things going on in burnout.
Yeah.
There's the one which is pretty obvious. Everybody can already sort of see where I'm coming from. It's like, hey, he's the guy that wrote the book, Metaflow, Serve Your Purpose. Hey, if you're super stressed, change what's causing the stress. And but I will say, for most people, they come into my, like, leaders that come into this, like, into my field, they're like, I need you to help me shift what I'm working on. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, we will. But you're burning out now. And to create the shift is not like, sometimes it takes 3 months, sometimes it takes 6 months, and you're burning out now. Yeah. In fact, you're rocked up to coaching and mentoring. You've been burning out for the last 3 to 6 months. You're like hanging on by a thread. So in that instance, but they're also like CEO. Yeah. So they can't just pull themselves out unless a health calamity happens, touch wood. And they're trying to avoid that, but they're also trying to shift. Yeah. And so in those instances, we have some really deep chats. So the key thing about burnout is, let's understand stress for a moment. Right? So stress, for most people, it's a trigger within your system. Yeah. But actually, there's a trigger within your system and there's a response within your system. And you need to get really clear on this. There's 2 things that's happening. There's a trigger and there's a response. There's a trigger and then there's a response. Right? And the trigger could be is, I really don't like this work that I'm doing. I'm just using that, running with that example. It could be anything. It could be a person, it could be whatever. I don't like this work. So it's like triggering you. And then you go in and you have to be in that environment and you're in it all day. It's like trigger. And you're having this response, trigger, response. And so that response is happening. And then you go home and now you are carrying all that response in your system from having been triggered all day. And this is where people reach for a drink just to try and numb out the response. Yeah. Or people, like, they find different vices or different things to sort of navigate. If you're healthy, you go for a long, nice little walk and you discharge everything. Hopefully you're barefoot. It's on an oval somewhere and all the earth is picking up all that charge. But I mean, there's the trigger, there's the response. So the conventional thinking on burnout is, I keep getting triggered. Let me remove the trigger and then I'll stop feeling the response. Yeah. And which is, it's an adequate approach. It's but it's a sledgehammer approach, because, like, for some people, it's like they've got kids, they've got family, like they can't just disconnect from the work that they do. It's like some of these CEOs that I coach, like, they've got 500, some people 1,200 people that report into them. Yeah. Like, all of a sudden them going, hey, I'm burnt out, see you later. Like, that's a lot of people's livelihoods. that impacts. And so, like, they're aware that they don't want to do that to people, but at the same time, they're going through something themselves, right? This is the challenge for the leader, that archetype. So in there, you can't just take the sledgehammer approach, because you slowly groom yourself into switching up the triggers. But how do you work with the response? And this is the awareness, right? This is how you work with burnout. So I'll give you the example. I know people use the example all the time, but it's just easy to sort of paint a picture. You're in the wild, you see a lion, trigger, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Your response, what's your response? Most people that have a healthy functioning nervous system, and I'm by no means judging those that freeze, because I freeze, touch wood, and we can talk about, where like the nervous system to the nth degree as well. Like there's a lot of different, but generally it's fight or flight. For some people now it's freeze through evolution. But yeah, generally you're not fighting a lion. Like 99.99999% of people are not fighting that lion. Yeah. Say what you will about, Bro Academy online or whatever. You're running. Yeah. You're running. It is flight. Yeah. And you run 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 all the way back to your village. And even then, when you get back to your village, you run and you run and you run and you're back to your village and you're like, and then, do you know what? I saw a lion and I saw this, and it was by the river, and then I ran away and you could still see there's so much rampant energy that you're running through, even internally, even as you stopped physically running, and you've been running for like 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers, 10 kilometers back to your village. Yeah. So what does that show us? Yeah, if you have a natural trigger, your natural response, there's many ways you can discharge, but physical movement is the easiest one. It literally just is. Break a sweat. Break a sweat. It's literally that straightforward. So if you're consistently finding yourself, for some people makes no sense. Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm already grinding the axe really hard in this domain. Now you tell me I need to go home and do a workout. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be that, but like 20 minutes, like going for a walk, just so you move things and the sweat a little bit. As long as you can break a sweat, you are now what we call closing the loop. There was a trigger and there's a response. And now the response isn't just hanging out in your system. When you work it through and you sweat, you've actually closed the loop. So there was a trigger, response isn't hanging out anymore. You've closed the loop on the trigger. Yeah. And the more you do that, the less you require to build up the resilience to be able to hold so many responses in your system. Yeah. You don't have to do that anymore because you're closing all these responses out, right? It's almost like you execute the task. It's halfway through executing, but it hasn't completed. Now you're completing it, right? And the beauty of a good workout, right, is that you actually close out like 12 different stress responses in the one workout, right?
Yeah.
Because like modern day living is quite stressful. Your boss said something to you a certain way. You took it on emotionally. Like they didn't mean that, but you took it on that way, right? Your partner said something, or you were driving past someone and they just missed you and you tightened up. Yeah, touch wood. Like there's all these stress responses that we're not discharging. And it's calling upon our resilience to try and build up our resilience to take on more and more and more and more. When really it's like resilience is also finite, right? Touch wood. Close the loop. And then now you're like in a better relationship with your burnout. Absolutely, like what we were discussing before, a wholesale change is available to you. The irony also being like from this more resource space, it's way easier to make a wholesale change as well because you're more dynamic, you're more spacious inside, right? It's like, oh, I know how to close the loop on my burnout. And actually, like I really am burning out. And I think, I've got more space to think about what's next for me. As opposed to before, you were just like filled up with all these responses, like desperately clawing from a very unclear place, how to make this shift and the change. Something needs to change. I'm desperate to change. It's not a very clear place to think from, right? It's not a very clear place to engineer your inner work, like the inner engineer, right? It's not a very clear place to engineer what's next for you from. Yeah. So this is like how you work with your burnout. The 2 key strategies. First one is to close the loop. Yeah. So understanding trigger, response, closing the loop on your response. There's other ways you can close the loop on your response, but a workout is the quickest way. It literally just is the quickest way. Sleep also plays a big difference. We can talk about all of that, but ultimately it's the getting a good sweat in is perfect, right? That'll close that loop on your burnout. And then you do need to have a chat about, if the stimulus is then consistently engaging you, then you probably need to have a conversation with yourself or a coach or a mentor or a therapist about what's next in terms of how do you create this shift. So there's less of that stimulus in your life.
How do we quantum leap? How do we shift?
Depends on what you're shifting and where you're shifting to and from, right? So, I mean, when you're describing quantum, I think awareness is a big part of it. Yeah, because I think when we start tuning into quantum leap, people are expecting a seismic shift. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the word quantum is quanta. It's like the smallest possible piece, right? And so it's really interesting when you're talking about a quantum shift. For most people, it's like I'm like changing my entire paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is what's happening out there. But internally, the shift is like quantum. When you look into the etymology of the word, is it's smaller than minuscule. Yeah. So it's like these little internal shifts that create massive shifts out there. Yeah. Touch wood is my awareness of a quantum shift. Yeah. Everybody is different. Now, also with the word quantum, when you start looking at it from a physics standpoint, pardon me for being the engineer for a moment, but what they're finding is like as we start stepping into an awareness of quantum mechanics, there's some really trippy things like the observer effect and so on and so forth. But one of the things that they're finding is time is another variable. Like we've got like length, width, depth, time, and they're variables that we can manipulate them to sort of create the world around us, right? Like we build buildings and all this sort of stuff. But in the quantum, time becomes a variable. I mean, is it something you can work with? Is it something you can affect? You can change? Maybe, potentially not. Who knows? But this is what the quantum's moving into. And so one of the things that's really fascinating, and I'm just going to share this with you and hopefully it lands, but our consciousness is having an experience of reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to us being souls living here in this lifetime. And it's stitching together moment to 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 moment in a linear fashion so that we can have this, what we experience is a linear experience, yeah, in time. So we go back, oh, I remember when I was 3. I remember when I was 5. I remember when I was 7. I remember when I was 9, 11, 13, 15, so on and so forth. And it's one linear track.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to get quantum, actually time, you step out of time and you look back in, right? And you go, oh, like actually it's all just happening now, which is really trippy for people to like step into. Yeah. In fact, the mind can't comprehend it. Why? Because the mind and the way consciousness is stepped in is in this linear fashion. So it's like already an operating system that's beyond what this current operating system can compute. So it's like many people are like, that's not how it is. And sure, like you're entitled to, your belief system. Yeah. But I've just interviewed and studied enough to sort of, so in the quantum, like the time becomes a variable. And so it's a really open space, right? And everything that's happening, my life, my grandfather's life, my grandfather's grandfather's life is all happening now.
Yeah.
It's really trippy. Like in this time space, from where I'm looking, they've passed away, right? But potentially, it's all happening in one big blink of an eye. Yeah. Now. And so when you start talking about quantum, it's like the shift, it becomes really interesting because then from there, like when people say, oh, I did like, I'm not qualified in past life regressions, but we look at like regression therapy. Yes. So got experience in that. And so, you can literally go back into the 5-year-old version of you and like work with that version of you and come back and feel a shift in present day reality. How does that work? Is that quantum? Yeah. And so you can future forecast. This is where manifestation, abundance works, touch wood. Like you look forward into your future and you say, hey, I would really appreciate this to be on my path. And you come back, those things show up in your future. Was that quantum? Right? It's like the relationship with the time that you're occupying, touch wood. Right? Now noticing you haven't gone out there and like revolutionize something. It's inner work. It's super small, these subtle pieces that you're working on inside. So, I mean, there's many different people will say very many different things about quantum shifts, quantum leaps, quantum timelines. Yeah. For me, in a really grounded sense, this relationship with the quantum is like small shifts, seismic outcomes. Yeah. And then it's like our relationship with our past, our future. And I see this being like a really grounded place, touch wood, to talk about quantum shifts from.
Yeah, I went on your website and I've seen you work with people like, well, I'm not sure if you work with them, but I'm assuming being able to be in that space, like with Michael Backwood and Eckhart Tolle. I think it was a 12. I forgot what to say. How do you say that? 12?
12 luminary program.
Yeah. Can you, first of all, I just wanted to ask, what is it like to be able to be in that space, and what does that program, what is it about?
Yeah, so the 12 luminary program is we're pulling together. So we've got a wait list at the moment, right? And expressions of interest. So we've pulled together like 12 of who we believe to be really inspirational and inspired evolution teachers to bring people together once a month. You get coached, guided, and mentored by them. And then every 2 weeks, you meet myself, right? And we go one-to-one to sort of integrate the shifts and the challenges and everything that's coming up. So it's a year-long journey with myself and 12 of like some of the teachers that you described. All of that culminates at the end in a retreat in Thailand, usually. And then, yeah, we spend about 10 days in Thailand integrating, shifting, doing some really beautiful things. So yeah, that's the rundown. But for most people, that's, yeah, by design, that's, yeah, like that's all the way in, right? Like for most people, the accessible work with myself is mentoring and masterminding. Yeah, it's once a month. It's monthly, and we help people shift. Like I said, everything we discussed, like align, believe, create. Doing all the inner alignment pieces, working through all the shadow work and stuff like that, and actually creating, building out. For some people, it literally is practical career coaching. For some people, it's literally business coaching. For some people, it's literally their leadership development program. Right? It's tailored to you from this like deep lens on like this is who you spiritually are to be here. Now let's actually practically build that out. That's Evolve. That's called Evolve. That's mentoring and masterminding together. And that's actually, that's generally how I work with most people.
Yeah. As we come close to the end of our conversation here, I do have 2 more questions that I want to ask you. Sure. One is when, everyone is different, of course, right? But when it comes down to this self-love and understanding oneself, right? How did you find self-love for yourself? And how can someone that is looking to begin their self-love journey, what tools do you have to support them to go on that journey for themselves?
Yeah, so self-love is unique to the individual, as you pointed out. I'd be lying if I said I'd mastered self-love. Self-love is one of those, it's a whole spiritual path unto itself. Yeah. And I mean, I'd be very skeptical if someone's like, I've mastered self-love, because again, you're in this 3D reality, you occupy a mind. The mind is an amazing computer at fixing things. It just loves to fix. Yeah. It loves to fix, right? And in order for things to be fixed, they need to be broken, right? And a really great quote in that space that's really helped me, and I meditate on it a lot, is Rumi's quote where he says, the cracks are where the light gets in. Yeah, like that's been, I know it's me being poetic because I'm referencing Rumi, but it really helps. It really helps having like that as sort of this guiding light in your systems, because then that gives you permission to be broken. Yeah, and even in your your brokenness doesn't require healing. It's like that's actually what makes you who you are. It's unique. It's beautiful. Relax. Keep going. It's good. Do you want to work with it? You can. If you don't want to work with it, it's also okay. Love yourself. So self-love is interesting as well, because it's not even different people show up to it differently. The same person on different days shows up to it differently. Some days it's self-love to run yourself a hot bath and just take a beat. Other days it's not, and you're just doing that thing where you procrastinate again. And it's actually more self-loving to apply yourself, send off 6 emails, do the work you're meant to be doing for your venture. Right? And it's the same person, it's just 2 days apart, so it's a difficult one to diagnose in that regard. But to give you an insight in terms of what's helped me the most, there's a really beautiful book by a gentleman named Kamal Ravikant. He's been on the podcast, and he wrote a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Kamal Ravikant. Yep. There's 2 brothers. One's Naval and one's Kamal. Kamal Ravikant wrote the book Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. It's a very short book. And there's 4 practices in there. One of them is to go into a meditative space, listen to a music that you love. And I think that might not be super accessible for everybody, but it's really beautiful. It works. Another one is just mirror work. Whenever you see yourself in front of a mirror, look at yourself in the eyes and tell yourself that you love yourself.
That's my favorite.
Touchwood, right? And it's just like a really easy practice. It's a really easy practice. And then I remember there was a phase where I was working on this deeply, and I was still in my corporate environment and settings. I mean, now we still go to corporate, we do trainings and stuff like that, you know, so I shouldn't say like we're not there anymore. We are, but we're in a very different capacity rather than me being an employee in engineering. So, I mean, just the mantra, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, right? While someone's like, you're in a meeting and, you know, I've been in these boardroom meetings where there's like 30 people talking, no one's really listening. And like, what am I doing here? It's like not even relevant to where I am. Those people are like having it's like you can just sit there and just repeat your mantra to yourself. Right? I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. Yeah, touch wood. That's a mantra for yourself to carry. So that book spells it out really profoundly because Kamal, when he came to writing that book, actually had, I mean, it was intense what happened to him on his journey in terms of, investors and just, you know, entrepreneurially what he was going through and just the impact that it had on him and his emotion and kind of where he got this message from and this little book like he shared with the world. And I mean, if you don't want to listen to the book, there's a podcast, Inspired Evolution, Kamal Ravikant. You guys can listen to the distillation of that episode on the podcast if that's more easier for you. I think it's like a 60-minute episode. We cover all this ground in it. But I found that to be really practical and executable in terms of like, oh yeah, this is a way that I can just like flex the muscle of like self-love and try and build it out for myself. But it takes work. Yeah, it takes work. But ultimately, when I start speaking to people in my coaching and mentoring around self-love, I think self-love is such a broad beast that in order to really start the work with self-love, it sort of starts with the name of your podcast, right? Like for me, I call it self-connection, self-relationship. Like it's like, oh, I'll just love myself. And it's like, yeah, but do you even have a relationship with yourself?
Yeah.
Like, do you take the time for yourself? Like, do you go for a walk? Do you spend the time in the tub? Do you have a shower? Like, you know, that you sort of connect in and like, you know, just feel really good about? Do you meditate? Doesn't have to be that. Do you go for a coffee with your friends? You know, you love swimming. Do you go swimming? You love tennis. Do you play tennis? Pardon me. Do you know what I mean? So like, is there a relationship with self? Because if there's no relationship with self, then I mean, self-love is just another thing to beat yourself over the head about. And is that self-love? Not really.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the antithesis. So building relationship with self is really where the rubber hits the road.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. And any supportive or encouraging word for someone else out there that may be going through a challenging time. I don't like using the word mental health, honestly, because I feel like at some point we're all a little bit in that mental space.
Mental fitness. Yeah.
So, but for anyone that is feeling a little low on that part of their journey right now, any supportive, encouraging word that you have for them?
Yeah. So bit of an asterisk, like, well, we didn't get into this, but yeah, I struggled with 6 years of depression, right? So I understand what it feels like to be low quite well. Like I was diagnosed with major depression. And, you know, we can talk another time about how I sort of worked through that, touch wood. But one of the key things in there is, so a little asterisk is some people do have a chemical imbalance going on in their mind where, I mean, medication can help, but also nutrition can help in that space as well, right? What we're currently working on outside of the Inspired Evolution we've pulled together a company called Gene Sups, which is basically supplementation based on your genes. We did a gene analysis on myself, and we found, I'm just using myself as an example, like there's certain genes which are switched on certain ways and other genes which are expressing themselves different ways. And it's really helpful to know that. And if you guys want to find out more, that's genesups.com, sups with 2 Ps. Now, the key thing in there is there are certain neurochemistry that's impacted on a gene, but on a gene level. Yeah. And so some people have a chemical imbalance. You can totally take medication to support you through that. And for some people, like where they are, they legitimately need that. Right. But once again, there's also other ways to work with that, right? Like you can supplement to support yourself correctly. Now, even with supplementation, when you start tuning into Ayurveda, it's like, why would you distill something down to its like supplementation? Why wouldn't you get the food that actually has it in there? Right. Now, there's a whole discussion to be had around soil health, the planet, mass agriculture. And I mean, we could be here for another podcast. But, right. So there's that asterisk, which is like there are some people that do need chemical support in their mind, given for where they are at their journey. Touch wood. For other people, I mean, it goes back to stress being an amazingly free life coach in your life. Yeah, I know you're struggling. I know, but like the reason I knew I was right for mentoring and coaching, people would rock up to like these compatibility calls, which, you know, anyone can book into one, amoritsandu.com/call. Yeah, you guys can jump on a call with myself. And we'll jump into the call. And it sounds rude, but people are explaining like just what's not working. And I'm sitting here and go, And I can tell I'm starting to smile. And for them, it's like so contextually out of place because it's like they're going through a lot and you're smiling, Amarit. And then it happens a lot of the time where I sit there and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I apologize for the smile on my face. And they're like, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, it's just I've seen the process of transformation, having worked with thousands of people now, again and again and again and again. And the more you're stacking up in front of me, they're like, this isn't working and that's not working. And I'm stuck here and I'm stuck here. And I'm like, I'm getting more and more G'd up because you're like, you're almost there. Like, you're about to break through. Because that's legitimately the formula for transformation is really straightforward. Every coach like sells you this, sells like honestly, it's the formula for transformation is literally just this. You will not change, right, until the discomfort of staying the same is greater than it is to slip into the new path and the shift. That's legitimately the name of that's it. Like that's it. And as a coach and a mentor and a guide, that's all you're doing is going, hey, you're re-bringing the pain back into focus. You're like, hey, that's painful. Don't you want to change? And they're like, oh, yeah, that is painful. I don't want to look like that, or I don't want to behave like that. I don't want to be like that. I want to change into this. And sometimes you forget. And so like you stay the way that you are. It's like, no. I paid for coaching. I paid for a mentor. I'm invested in this space to remind me not to become like that because I genuinely did want to invest in myself to become this different version of myself. Yeah. The coach's other responsibility, and most coaches don't do this very well, which is why mentoring works really well, and I call it mentoring, is like, hey, let's actually help you create that shift. It's not just about coaching you out of where you don't want to be. It's about mentoring you into where you want to be.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, how do we make this easier? Right. And that's some of the stuff we've been discussing today. Right. It's like, how do we actively make this easier? And for me, that's mentoring. Yeah. And so that's the formula for transformation. So, I mean, when people start to stack on, it's like, dude, you're going through a lot. I mean, absolutely. I hear you. I feel you, right? Touch wood. Like there's a lot going on in that space. But also it's the formula for transformation. And in fact, even beyond the individual, you look at collectively how much is going on for the planet right now. I am the eternal optimist. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, everything seems to be breaking down in many ways to break through. Yeah. And if you're breaking down right now, your breakthrough is just that much closer. Yeah. And you do pop through. You look back at yourself and look at all the stuff you've been through in your life. You've always broken through. You're here. You're listening to this. Yeah. This is another trial, another tribulation. But I mean, to sort of inspire you on, I've done so many interviews with so many different people that are remarkable in their own right. I used to say 90% of them. It's legitimately like 100%. I don't know why I caveat it. Everybody that's done something remarkable has built it upon their biggest challenge. Their biggest challenge has become their biggest gift. They've learned to go through the hero's journey, the dark night of the soul. I don't call it the dark night of the soul, sorry, anymore. I call it the dark night of the mind. The dark night of the mind. And they've worked through that to come back with the gift. They slayed the dragon with the sword. And they go, hey, they lay down their sword to society and go, this is our sword. It's not just mine, it's ours. Let me help you. This is the sword. Yeah. Marissa Peer, she was she's rapid transformational therapist, certifying rapid transformational therapy. People were shifting their interior world through therapy in like hour-long sessions. They're shifting complete things, right? Without having to revisit therapy over and over and over and over and over again. Touch wood. Yeah. She was told as a maid for her whole life that she was never going to amount to anything. You're a maid. You're never going to be anybody. You're not good enough. You're not good for anything. You're just a maid. You're just a maid. Sorry to all the you're not good. She spent her whole life in this space, and realizing eventually she had this, I'm not good enough. She realized it as a thought, and she go, that's, why would I say that to myself?
Yeah.
She became a hypnotherapist, started to rewrite it. Now she rewrites, I can't even say thousands, like they're on a mission to rewrite 1 billion people.
Wow.
Right? And so that's her challenge. That's her breakthrough. Right? So it's almost like the deeper the challenge, the deeper the roots, the sweeter the juice, right? So the deeper the roots, the bigger the breakthrough, right? Touch wood. So yeah, this is, as you're going through what you're going through, you will reap the reward. Spring will come. Harvest will come. You are going through winter. Touch wood. It happens. Yeah, these cycles are necessary for us to learn and grow. Yeah. If you are struggling and need a space, reach out. Yeah. Because sometimes it just helps to have someone around with a bit more of a vantage. It's not, just goes, oh, yeah, like this is okay. Yeah. It can just help to have a support and a rudder through these times. We're not meant to go through, like you said in your introduction, we're not meant to go through life alone. Yeah. It's a networked event. Yeah. Hopefully that helps. But your biggest challenges lead to your biggest gifts. If it's a really challenging time, I mean, I wouldn't be here sharing what I'm sharing with you had I not gone through like 6 years of major depression. Touch wood. I wouldn't have the self-awareness that came from that. I wouldn't have become a meditator. I wouldn't have cultivated more levels of self-awareness, self-reflection. I wouldn't have gotten into personal development to the point where now I support other people's with their spiritual and personal advancement. Touch wood. Like, so I look back now and I go, do you hate the 6 years of depression? I was like, I can't fault it. It was perfect by design. I needed that to pop through. Was it comfortable? I don't wish it upon my worst enemy. That's right.
Oh, thank you so much. I definitely could feel exactly what you're saying there, because I feel like I kind of live in that same space of like whatever challenge that's going on in my life, right? Or whatever lessons, whatever that I'm supposed to learn in that moment. I feel like that's what it's needed for me to be able to advance in that space. So I appreciate you for breaking it down in that way and spreading light on that as well right now. And I would have loved to talk to you more about like that depression, and how that was like for you, and how did you break through from that? And because the space that you live in now, it's one could look at it and admire it and be like, oh, he's so, in this like free space, I would call it, right? But please.
No, I mean, yeah, it's I mean, it's easy to project. I'm still human. I still have my moments. We're still going through things. And I think people have a tendency towards depression. People have a tendency towards anxiety. Society, the way it's rigged at the moment, intentionally inflames some of these tendencies because it pulls you off your center.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a whole nother podcast waiting to happen there.
Definitely bringing you back just to talk about depression. So thank you so much again for joining us on Self Reflection Podcast. This has been an enlightened conversation. At least for myself, I don't know if it's going to impact anyone else out there, but I know for myself it was very enlightening for myself, and also allow me to somewhat like do a little bit more self-reflection in this moment as we were having a conversation. So thank you again for joining us on Self-Reflection Podcast. If we do want to connect with you, I know you mentioned several times, but I always love to ask this at the end as well. If we want to connect with you on any platform, social media, or on your website, where can we go?
Yeah, absolutely. You can jump on a call with me, amoritsandu.com/call. amoritsandu.com/call. Yeah, we sort of have a look at, it's called a compatibility call. Let's have a look at where you're at, if you want to work into mentoring. Yeah. And so there's that. For me, also, you listen to 90 minutes of a podcast. I mean, 20 minutes from now, just add on 20 more minutes. And you can practically have your values. We discussed this, at great lengths. So amoritsandu.com, amoritsandu.com/values, VALUES. I mean, that's such a fundamental place, right, to start with everything, because that is your joy when you're living into your values, and that's completely free. So tune into that. The compatibility call is completely free as well. And then also you've got the also completely free YouTube podcast, youtube.com/inspired evolution, or just in YouTube type in Amorit Sandhu, and you'll find our podcast. And there's 2 episodes like this coming out every week, touch wood. So yeah, there's plenty of good resources there. I hope that support you on your journey and your path. And yeah, ultimately, thank you so much for having me on the Self-Reflection Podcast. Such a beautiful name, such a beautiful vibe. Thank you so much for your great questions. It's really been an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys so much for listening to Self-Reflection Podcast or for watching Self-Reflection Podcast. I hope that you guys gain some type of value from this conversation that we had here today. If you have yet to subscribe to Self-Reflection Podcast, please go ahead and hit that subscription button. I truly appreciate it as we seek to grow our community out here on this platform. Also, you want to connect with us on our social media, you can find me at Lira, LIRA_NDIFON. Thank you guys so much. And, I hope that you guys will create a moment for self-reflection as well. It goes a long way. Take care of yourself, love yourself, be kind, and be gentle with yourself. Until next time, you're listening to Self-Reflection Podcast, and this is your girl, Lira. Ta-da!